That cottage is the obvious choice for the reception, and honestly, it just makes sense for us to eventually take it over. My brother set his bottle of Sleeman down on the patio railing like the matter was already settled, not a question in sight. You're barely up there, Sylvie. You work constantly. What are you even doing with 4 bedrooms and a boathouse by yourself? My mother reached across the picnic table and covered his hand with hers. My father took a long sip of his coffee and looked out at their backyard. The backyard of the house I'd helped them keep when they couldn't make the mortgage in 2018, and said nothing, just nodded. The same slow nod he'd been giving my brother's ideas his entire life, as if gravity itself agreed. I almost choked on my sparkling water. I looked around the table. My brother, his fiancée Tara, my parents, a half-eaten bowl of potato salad between us, and waited for someone to laugh. Nobody laughed. My name is Sylvie. I'm 32 years old, and I bought my Muskoka Cottage 9 years after moving to Toronto with a single suitcase, a computer science degree from Waterloo, and exactly $1,400 in my checking account. I built a career in software development the slow, grinding way, a junior role at a startup, then 5 years at a mid-size fintech firm downtown, then a senior position where I eventually led a team of 12. I saved aggressively. I gave up vacations, cars, and for most of my 20s, any apartment that had in-suite laundry. I lived on a budget so tight that my friends used to joke about it, and I invested every dollar I could squeeze out because I had exactly one dream: a piece of water. My own piece of water in cottage country, somewhere I could sit at the end of a dock and hear nothing but the loons and the wind through the white pines. 7 years ago, I found it. A 4-bedroom property on Lake Rosso. A proper Muskoka lake, the kind with clear water and granite outcroppings and sunsets that look like someone deliberately lit them for dramatic effect. There was a main cottage, a small guest bunkie, and a boathouse with a second-story sleeping loft. The asking price was $1.74 million. I spent 4 months in negotiation, another 2 in due diligence, and I paid for every cent of it myself. No co-signers, no family loan, no help. Not because my family didn't offer, but because I had learned by then what help from my family actually meant. My brother, 3 years older, never held a job longer than 18 months, spent his early 30s cycling through business ideas that my parents funded, and then quietly wrote off. Had never once been denied anything he asked for. He dropped out of his business administration program at 20, and my parents paid for it without complaint. He borrowed $85,000 from my grandfather 2 years before my grandfather died. Money that was supposed to be a short-term loan for a landscaping company that dissolved within a year. The loan was never repaid. When my grandfather passed and the estate was being settled, the outstanding balance somehow disappeared into the family. Silence the way these things do, when nobody wants an argument at the funeral. He met Tara 3 years ago. She has a way of looking at things. Houses, furniture, other people's belongings. The way a real estate appraiser might, except without the professionalism. Within 6 months of their engagement, she had begun referring to my cottage as the family property in casual conversation, as though the phrase alone could transfer the deed. That Sunday afternoon on my parents' patio, I finally understood that the two of them had been planning this for a while. You could find a condo closer to work, Tara offered, smiling the smile of someone delivering good news. And honestly, the lake house is just sitting there when it could be enjoyed by a whole family. She said, family the way people say community in speeches, warmly, inclusively, and aimed directly at me in a way that made very clear I was not actually part of the group she was imagining. My brother leaned forward. We're talking about our kids growing up there, Sil. Don't you think that's better than you sitting up there on your laptop every long weekend? I looked at my mother. She gave me the look I had been receiving my whole life. The soft, apologetic, please don't make. This difficult look that had smoothed over every one of my brother's imbalances for 35 years. I took a slow sip of water. I set the glass down carefully. and I told them I was willing to sit down with my estate lawyer to review the property documentation, because I thought it was important that everyone understand exactly what they were dealing with before the conversation went any further. My mother looked relieved. Tara looked satisfied. My brother leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man who'd already won. They thought I was looking for a graceful way to surrender. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the better part of a Thursday afternoon on the phone with my lawyer, Miss Hebert, who has handled my real estate and estate planning for 6 years, and who, when I described the Sunday patio scene to her in detail, said very quietly, "Sylvie, I think you need to come in and hear what's in the original trust documentation before we talk to anyone." I went in the next morning, what she showed me over her conference table, with a cup of green tea going cold beside me, changed the shape of everything. They should have listened before they booked that boardroom. I did. My brother arrived at Miss Habert's Bloor Street office, wearing a blazer I had never seen before, which told me he understood at some level that this was a performance. Tara was beside him in heels, slightly too formal for a Tuesday morning, carrying a large canvas tote bag that shifted and clinked when she set it on the reception desk. My father wore his good jacket. My mother had her hair done. I arrived 7 minutes early and sat in the corner chair, reading nothing in particular on my phone. When they came in and saw me already there, calm and unbothered, my brother's confidence flickered for exactly 1 second before he reassembled it. Miss Hebert brought us into the boardroom, a spare, clean room with one long table, 8 chairs, and a window overlooking the street below. She offered coffee. Nobody wanted coffee. Everyone wanted to get to the part where they got what they came for. Tara did not wait for an invitation. She reached into her canvas tote and pulled out 3 printed pages, laying them flat across the middle of the table, with the practiced efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this moment. They were design mood boards, screenshots and cutouts assembled on cardstock, each one labeled in her neat handwriting. Dock renovation concept, main cottage refresh, and, at the bottom of the stack, the one that made something in my chest go very quiet. Boathouse loft, T's personal studio. "We've done a lot of research," she said brightly, as though Miss Hebert had called this meeting specifically to receive a design presentation. "The boathouse footprint is incredible for a private retreat space. We were thinking something Scandinavian, very minimal, very clean, and the dock needs to be extended if we're hosting a proper reception in August. We've already had a preliminary conversation with a contractor who does a lot of work in the Muskokas." My brother tapped the second mood board. "That wood paneling in the main room is original and it's very dated. We'd want to update the whole feel of the cottage, bring it into the current decade." My mother was typing notes into her phone. My father turned to Miss Hebert and slid a hand across the table toward her, as though an invisible pen were already there. "So we just need to work out the title transfer. What's the cleanest way to proceed? We have lunch at 1. Miss Hebert, and I have always admired this about her, did not change her expression at all. She folded her hands, looked at each person in the room in turn, and said, "Before we discuss any transfer of title, I need to walk everyone through the documentation governing this property, because there are several elements here that I believe the family is not fully aware of." She opened a folder, forest green, slim, neat, and placed a single stapled document in the center of the table. It was a copy of the original trust deed my grandfather had established before he died, the one that had structured how his assets, including an initial capital contribution he had made to assist with my Lake Rosso purchase, would be governed going forward. He had insisted on the trust structure quietly, without drama, without making a point of it to anyone at the time. I had not fully understood until Miss Hebert walked me through it that Thursday morning, exactly what he had built into it, or why. "Your grandfather was a methodical man," Miss Hebert said. "He was also a man who paid very close attention to the people around him. Before he passed, he inserted a specific provision into this trust. I am going to read it to you verbatim so there is no ambiguity. She turned to the second page of the document and tapped a section highlighted in yellow. Section 9, Clause C. In the event that any direct family beneficiary attempts, whether formally or informally, in writing or in person, to compel, pressure, or stake a claim to the primary residential property held in trust by the designated beneficiary, and for the purposes of this clause, a formal demand, a structured negotiation meeting, or any documented expression of entitlement, shall constitute such an attempt, the trust shall immediately trigger an offset review. All outstanding obligations owed by the claiming party to the estate or to any trust beneficiary must be resolved in full before any transfer, negotiation, or formal discussion of ownership may proceed. Tara frowned. What's an offset review? It means, Ms. Hebert said, setting the document flat on the table, that before any conversation about this property can legally continue, we must first resolve every outstanding financial obligation between your fiancé and this estate. The color in my brother's face shifted in a way I had never seen before. Ms. Hebert reached into her folder and placed a second document on the table beside the first. This one cream-colored, older, with a notarial stamp at the bottom. Your grandfather's estate holds a recorded loan issued to your son on March 14, 2010. The principal was $85,000. The loan was structured with a 4% annual interest rate and a 3-year repayment term. She looked up from the page. The loan has never been repaid. With compound interest applied over 14 years, the current outstanding balance is $142,600. There is a particular sound a room makes when something large and invisible collapses inside it. It is not loud. It is the sound of breath held and then released unevenly. My father made that sound. My mother stopped typing. My brother sat completely still. My brother started. That was forgiven. At the funeral, Dad said, verbal reassurances at a funeral are not legally binding instruments in Ontario, Ms. Hebert said. Not unkindly. Just precisely. The loan was formally documented. The estate retained it. And Clause C of your grandfather's trust explicitly states that in the event of an offset review, no forgiveness of debt is recognized without a written instrument executed by the trust's designated beneficiaries. She glanced at me for one brief moment. Which is Sylvie? I had not said a word since we sat down. I did not say anything now. I looked at my brother and kept my face very still, the way you do when you already know how a story ends. Tara's mood boards were still spread across the conference table. Boathouse loft. T's personal studio. Had drifted slightly toward the window. Nobody moved to collect it. $142,000, my father said, not as a question. Before any discussion of the property may proceed, Miss Hebert confirmed. My brother looked at Tara. Whatever he was searching for, in her expression. I could see from across the table that he didn't find it. She was looking at the cream-colored loan document with the expression of someone running numbers they don't like the answer to. Tara's parents were comfortable people. Her father owned several commercial properties in Oakville. Her mother sat on the board of a private school. They had agreed to this engagement with a certain picture in mind. A picture that presumably did not include a $142,600 debt attached to the groom, surfaced at the exact moment he tried to take his sister's property. That was a different kind of picture entirely. There has to be a way around this, my brother said, his voice doing something thin and unfamiliar. It's a clause in an old document. We can challenge it. You are welcome to seek independent legal counsel, Ms. Hebert said. But the trust was properly constituted and has been affirmed by the estate. A challenge would be a matter of litigation, with associated costs and no guarantee of outcome. She paused. I should also mention that the act of this gathering, this meeting, initiated by the family to discuss a property transfer, has already triggered the offset clause. The review is now formally open. That is not a threat. It is simply what the document says. My mother looked at me across the table. Sylvie, please, this is family. Can't sit down together and find something that works for everyone? I had thought about what I might say in this moment. I had tried several versions of it in my head over the previous 2 weeks. Measured versions, generous versions, pointed ones. In the end, I did not use any of them. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair and I said, quietly enough that everyone had to be still to hear it, I didn't put the clause in the trust. He did. Because he knew this family better than any of us wanted to admit. I walked down the hall to the elevator. I did not look back. The months after that Tuesday morning were smaller and more ordinary than the meeting itself had been, the way aftermath usually is. The $142,600 debt didn't get paid. My brother didn't have it, and whatever conversation he had with Tara's family about the situation clearly did not go the way he'd hoped. The engagement lasted another 4 months. Then Tara's Instagram shifted quietly from couples photos to solo travel, and that particular chapter closed without ceremony. My brother left 2 voicemails in the weeks after the meeting. I let both go. In the first, he was angry. His voice clipped and tight, telling me I had engineered the situation, that I had chosen a piece of real estate over my own blood. In the second message, left 3 weeks later, he was quieter. He said he didn't understand why I had let it get that far. I kept both messages for a while, sitting in my voicemail inbox like small stones. Then one evening on the dock, I deleted them both without calling back. My parents stopped reaching out after the second month. My father sent a Christmas card with a brief note saying he hoped I was keeping well. I sent one back that said the same. That is where things stand now. What I know about myself, having come through all of it, is this. I spent most of my life trying to take up less space so that the people around me could take up more. I kept my ambitions quiet and my achievements unannounced because I understood from a very young age that visible success in my family was an invitation. If you had something, it was only a matter of time before it was reframed as something that belonged to everyone. To the group, to the need, to the existing order of things that had been in place long before you came along and complicated it by earning your own way. My grandfather understood that. He was a quiet man, a hardware store owner from Sudbury, who had spent 40 years learning that people reveal themselves the moment they believe something is within reach. He never lectured me about it. He never warned me. He just went to his notary one afternoon and built something into the structure of things that would say, long after he was gone, what he had always believed, but never found the occasion to say aloud. That what I'd worked for was mine, and that being mine was supposed to mean something. I think about him on the dock sometimes, usually in the early morning, before anyone else on the lake is moving, when the water is completely flat and the light comes through the pines at a low August angle and turns everything a color that doesn't have a proper name. I have a coffee. I sit with my legs hanging over the edge. A loon calls from somewhere across the water, that hollow, carrying sound that seems to travel farther than physics should allow. And I just sit with it for a while. I have not changed the wood paneling in the main cottage. I like it. It's old pine, slightly uneven, warm in a way that newer materials aren't. I have not extended the dock, because the dock is exactly the right length. The boathouse loft has my kayak in it, 2 folding Muskoka chairs I picked up at a yard sale, and a string of lights I hung one September afternoon, when I had nowhere to be and no one to answer to. If you had asked me before that Sunday patio, before the Sleeman bottle, and the mood boards, and the phrase family property, whether I would have chosen the cottage over my relationship with my family, I don't think I would have known how to answer. The question would have felt like a real one, like I was being asked to weigh 2 things that both mattered. But standing in that boardroom, watching Tara gather her cardstock mood boards with the quick efficiency of someone erasing evidence of themselves, I understood that the choice had never actually been mine to make. It had been made long before that afternoon, made across years of small decisions and deliberate silences and all the many moments my parents had looked carefully in a different direction. I wasn't choosing a building over my family. I was finally, at 32 years old, refusing to choose against myself. My grandfather built the clause into the trust. But standing your ground is something you have to do yourself. In every room, starting long before anyone ever pulls out a legal document to prove the point. I figured that out on a lake in Muskoka. At the end of a dock I paid for myself, watching the sun come up over water that belongs to me and no one else. I want to know what you would do. If the people you love, the people you've shown up for, helped quietly, never asked anything from, decided one day that what you built was available to them, not because they needed it, but because they'd always assumed you would give way. Would you have let it go, to keep the table peaceful? Or would you have let the truth land the way it lands when you finally stop softening it for everyone else? Tell me in the comments. And if this story found you at the right moment, follow along. Because I have more to say, and I'm not finished yet.